Hello again. My name is Ryan Adams. You may know me from the Beware the Day podcast. I'm here with Black El Paso Voice, and we are interviewing
State Representative.
State Representative 70 for District 77,
Yes, sir.
Alexsandra Annello.
Hello, nice to meet you, Ryan. I'm so glad to be here.
The pleasure's all mine. So, what motivated you to run for Texas State Representative position in District 77?
Yeah, great question. I appreciate it. House District 77 has had a long time Representative Lena Ortega, and she announced her retirement this summer. I've been on City Council for about 7 years, or I was, as of Tuesday, on City Council for 7 years. And a lot of the work that I did on City Council was really in response to the state. Protecting women's health care on the local level, protecting our books, creating a community ID to protect our immigrant community members against laws like SB4 that allowed the governor to deport anyone he assumes has crossed the border. Have done a lot of substance abuse work at the city, making sure that our police were having Narcan on hand and working with our local substance abuse organizations. It seemed like the natural next step was to take that on, head on at the state level. And a lot of people have asked, you were mayor pro tem at the city, you were in a position of power, why would you step down to do this? And it's not going to be easy, right? We talk about protecting our queer communities and women. Democrats are in the minority. But I think it's important to remember that the state is not just all of those hot button items. Right? I'm the incoming chair of our mental health authority. A lot of the work that I've done in El Paso has been around expansion of mental health for veterans, for youth. And that's the kind of work at the state level that reaches outside of just the city and can be beneficial to the entire state, and the work that I want to continue doing and pushing for.
Which leads me to my next question. What are your top priorities for addressing the needs of the residents of District 77?
Sure. So mental health, absolutely.
Mhm.
Expansion of Medicaid for youth. A lot of people don't know that children in Medicaid cannot receive outpatient services to be covered by their insurance. So that's a big one, as well as expanded funding for IDD workers, as well as home health workers. Infrastructure is a really big conversation in this community. The I-10 expansion project has been a hot button issue. Infrastructure is extremely important for this community, but we really have seen a lack of community input.
So, how do you plan to support the local economy and create job opportunities within District 77?
Sure. So economic development is really huge, especially on the state level, right? We need to be looking at a big issue at the city has been the arena, right? How are we looking at the state to support event centers or quality of life like that in our community, as well as the expansion of tax credits. We've seen that kind of rolled back on the state level. El Paso itself has been exempt from some of those rollbacks. We're really pushing for more of those tax exemptions at the state level for business growth. We've got a big aerospace aerospace situation. We have a large aerospace center being built at our airport, and we're really going to need state support to bring that to fruition. But then again, transportation is huge for the economy, and we need to be building smart and safely.
And what is your stance on improving healthcare access and affordability for the residents of District 77?
Sure, healthcare is a huge issue in this community. And you and I were speaking before the podcast about the new cancer center that the state approved in last year's budget. That'll be really important. It'll hopefully be or will be in House District 77. It'll be really important that progress moves through. I was also really fortunate to go to the state during the last session and advocate for $115 million from HB1 for a new mental health facility for forensic beds. We were able to get that money for planning, but being able to see that through and making sure that there is a facility in this community to help with forensic beds. And a lot of people are kind of unfamiliar with that. Individuals who end up in the jail who are having or in mental health crisis sometimes cannot stand trial, and the prison is not the best place for them. We do not have the accommodations for additional beds in our current facility, and our current facility is aging. It's not the most beautiful place. There's no outside area. And so rebuilding our psych center to obviously not be a pleasant place for people, but a place that they are not afraid to go to and that they can go to if they have been put through the prison system. Those are going to be really important healthcare initiatives that were started and need to be seen through in my district.
And I think you may have touched on this earlier. How do you intend to address infrastructure and transportation challenges in District 77?
So transportation, like I said, has been a huge issue. The I-10 expansion is extremely important, right? That infrastructure is aging. Those bridges need to be rebuilt, but we need to be doing it safely, and we need to be doing it with community input. The real concern throughout the community is the expansion of the environmental impact and the loss of homes and businesses. In El Paso, for some reason, we've really seen that TxDOT waits until the back end of their planning to engage their communities. We don't see that across Texas. That is an El Paso specific problem. We need to be engaging people in that process. And so we have a better product at the end. But also, we hear a lot of times, and you live in El Paso, it is scary to drive on our roads on a Saturday evening, right? How many times do we see on FitFam, for example, that there's been a terrible car accident? Technology on highways across this country has expanded for safety, and we are so far behind in El Paso, right? I think they put up those do not enters at Porfirio Diaz. They didn't help. The accidents are still happening, right? And so when we talk about restoring our aging infrastructure and expanding our freeways, how are we talking about the safety and protection of our community members as well?
What measures do you propose to enhance education and support schools in District 77?
Yeah, I mean, the education system is a real challenge. This last session, the governor has really been fighting for vouchers, which, if you're aware, is basically taking your tax dollars and making them available to individuals who go to private school. And there's no limitation on that. I know that there were a lot of advocates that went to the governor and said, hey, if you want to make this a low-income basis thing and give low-income students an option, we would support that. Nope, he wanted it to be for everyone, which would cut our school's budget in half. I think we all realize the problem with our public schools is that their budgets have continually been slashed. And so there needs to be a look at prioritizing funding, the restructuring of funding, and we also need to be paying our teachers adequately. It was the first year that the state of Texas had a surplus in 25 plus years, and our teachers were the only state employees who did not get a raise. On the ballot in November, we approved a raise for retirees, but that happens at every biennium. We need to have a consistent plan so retirees are not anxious every 2 years on are they going to be able to survive with inflation. So paying our teachers, paying our retirees, and restructuring our financing of public schools is going to be extremely important. I think there's also been a real conversation about CRT on the state level. This state is predominantly Black and brown. Taking away the conversations of history is not helping anyone in this community, is not educating us into a better Texas. And so I will continually always fight for expansion of education for our minority communities, and did so at the city level, created a banned book section in our libraries. The state can't come in and take our books at our libraries because of a civil rights lawsuit. But now when you walk into a library, the first book that a student will see is one that they can't get at their public schools anymore. And hopefully that will entice them to read those. We've just got to get our kids to the libraries, but that's a different issue.
Absolutely. How will you advocate for the interests of veterans and military families in District 77?
Yeah, that's a really great question as well. Having been on our mental health authority, Veterans Mental Health Services has been a huge priority of mine. Building a new clinic on the east side. We have the new federal clinic also in HD 77. But I think education is a really important system for our veterans, right? Making sure that they are getting the credits for education that they were promised comes down from the federal government to the state level, and we need to make sure that we are making that equitable to all veterans in our community.
Okay, fantastic. What strategies do you have for promoting environmental sustainability and addressing climate concerns within District 77?
Yeah, that's a huge one, I think, in far west Texas in general, right? And I think it's really important for people to remember that's not just solar and wind energy, right? We're talking water, we're talking healthcare, and we're also talking agriculture, which is big. I think people forget in El Paso, in the county, agriculture is huge. And so there really does need to be a push for a study on how behind we are when it comes to sustainability, right? There are a lot of conversations about water catchment, or at least at the city level, water catchment, solar panels, renewable energy. But what do we need in this community to survive, right? How is our air quality and how are we addressing it? What are our issues with water when it comes to agriculture, as well as low-income housing development, right? It is environmental sustainability is a very far-reaching issue, and we need to understand how unequitable we have been and really where our challenges are going to be before we can move forward to have conversations to put money towards things when we don't know what the far impacts will be.
Now, what specific policies or initiatives do you plan to advocate for in order to address the challenge of affordable housing in District 77?
And that's been a great one. Having been on the city council, housing was something that we dealt with all the time. And so the city council came up with a plan that said, where are we going to look at revitalizing our communities? And we really wanted to push for the center of the community, right? There is the housing complex on Hondo Pass that has been abandoned for years. You see is getting redone now. We have Taze in South Central that is getting renovated. But there's been issues on the federal level with that because HUD is saying, well, we don't want to put housing complexes back into low-income neighborhoods. And it's like, but in El Paso, it's a really different conversation because we have communities that are rooted there. Right. And bringing those communities back are less about socioeconomics and more about community. And so it's been a real challenge at the state level, or I'm sorry, at the federal level. And so I think really at the state level, having conversations about where does community need to be rebuilt and how are we helping to fund that? The state took on some issues this last legislative session with HB 2127, which is called the Death Star Bill. It was a huge preemption bill that essentially told cities and counties what they could not do. And it was everything from zoning to animal welfare. I mean, it was just a very broad bill, and it was shut down in the courts because it was too overreaching. But there were some of those things that I think community should be talking about, right? Zoning is really important for me when it comes to commercial and industrial. Those should not be in residential areas. But I believe housing is a right. And, when you have housing limitations with zoning, when it comes to parking minimums, when you have setback minimums, when you have unit limits. And I think we need to be looking at that and helping at the state level to fund those kind of things and bring in incentives for people to build without those regulations. I think we've seen in a lot of other states too, and some of these programs have not been great, but like in New York, right, if you're building a condo, you have to have so many affordable units. Right. You can't do that in Texas. In other states, if you build, you need to give money into a housing fund. You can't do that in Texas, right? And so we need to be looking at some financial opportunities. We're not going to help the developer privately, helping the communities build out the infrastructure they need to bring people in.
Excellent. And finally, what is your stance on government assistance programs such as the Texas State Affordable Housing Corporation, and how do you plan to support or improve these initiatives?
So this is something that I've been working on a lot locally. I think the Housing Corporation can be a really great asset. We've seen it be extremely successful in areas like San Antonio. What's been happening at the city of El Paso is that we have our own housing group, the county has its own housing group, and then you have the housing finance group. We're completely in different silos, and we're not really drawing down on those dollars and those bonds that they have to be able to build more affordable units. And so as a city council member, what I've done in the last year is try to just get everybody in the room, a small step, but I really think that if we're utilizing those services together, we're going to get more units at a better rate. And so I would love to be that person on the state who's having those conversations at the city level. As a city council representative, I've always worked well with my state reps, but never been able to just sit down and have conversations on where are the assistance and the utilization of these programs. And because it was something I worked on so closely at the city level, would love to take that experience to the state and then also back to the city and really help collaborate those kind of things.
Great. Okay, I want to give you an opportunity to talk directly to the citizens of El Paso County.
Thank you.
And tell them why we should vote for you.
Well, I appreciate it, Ryan. So my name is Alexsandra Annello. I'm running for House District 77. This is an extremely important race. Our delegation, a lot of people don't know, is one of the only full Democratic delegations in the state, and they have been so strong before. And when they are strong, we have seen access to education be strengthened, access to healthcare be strengthened, and it is really important that we put someone in that seat who has the values of our delegation is going to work with them. I'm the only person running for this seat who has experience in helping our communities of color, helping protect our healthcare, helping protect our education and our immigrant community members. And I want to continue to fight for the people of El Paso to be reflective of the values of this community. So thank you so much for that opportunity. I really appreciate it.
It's been our pleasure today. And for Black El Paso Voice, this is Ryan, and we will see you next time.